When you throw extra money at a 4% mortgage instead of the stock market, you are basically choosing a safe 4% bond over an investment that has historically paid around 8 to 10% a year. On paper, that sounds like a small, responsible difference. But over a 30-year time frame, it is absolutely brutal. The exact same monthly cash that earns you a $300,000 interest saving at 4% could grow into over $1 million if you let it compound in a diversified portfolio. Forbes, Ameriprise, and Bankrate all say the exact same thing in different words. If you locked in a low-rate mortgage and you are behind on your retirement savings, aggressively prepaying that debt is like celebrating because you paid off a cheap loan, while quietly throwing away your biggest wealth-building opportunity. The math on this is stubborn, and it does not care about how good it feels to send an extra payment to the bank. I have run these numbers hundreds of times, and the opportunity cost of paying off cheap debt early is one of the most common financial mistakes middle-class earners make. By the end of this video, you will know exactly why holding on to low-interest debt is actually a massive financial lever. If you find this breakdown helpful, and you want to stop making invisible financial errors, hit the like button. It is genuinely the best return on investment for your time today, as it helps this channel reach more people who might be making this exact same mathematical own goal. Let us start by looking at the common belief that drives this mistake. From the time we earn our first real paycheck, we are taught a very simple and very compelling narrative about money. Debt is bad. All debt is a heavy chain around your ankle, and the ultimate American dream is to own your home free and clear. It makes total sense on a primal level. Your house is your primary shelter. If you own it outright, no one can ever take it from you. And your monthly baseline expenses drop off a cliff. Financial advisors, well-meaning parents, and popular money gurus have preached this gospel for decades. They tell you to cut your expenses, live far below your means, and attack your mortgage principal with every spare dollar you can scrape together. It sounds highly responsible. It feels incredibly safe. But this advice completely ignores the basic cost of capital. Here is the brutal math of the situation. Every time you make an extra mortgage payment, you are getting a risk-free return equal to your mortgage rate. Let us assume you have a 4% mortgage. You are guaranteeing a 4% return. But the opportunity cost is missing out on the compounding growth of investments. Long-run market data heavily favors the investor here. According to historical tracking from Trade That Swing, the S&P 500 has a 150-year average nominal return of 9.35%. NerdWallet and MacroTrends data show that over the last 30 years specifically, the average return has hovered around 10%. Even if we dial that down to a conservative 8% for planning purposes, you are looking at a 4 percentage point spread. Over 3 decades, a 4% spread destroys potential wealth. Most people stop right here. They look at that 4% spread, shrug, and say they prefer the guaranteed safety of paying down the house. But if you think a 4% difference just means you end up with slightly less money, wait until you see what happens at year 20. The human brain is terrible at understanding compound interest. We think in straight lines, but money grows on a curve. When you choose the mortgage over the market, you are not just losing the 4% spread this year, you are losing the growth on that growth for the rest of your life. I'm going to show you a scenario with just $500 a month that proves exactly how this invisible leak drains hundreds of thousands of dollars from your future net worth. Imagine you have restructured your budget and you suddenly find an extra $500 of cash flow every single month. You have a 30-year time frame before you want to retire. You have 2 choices. Scenario 1 is you take that $500 and you send it directly to your mortgage lender to prepay your 4% loan. Scenario 2 is you take that exact same $500 and you invest it in a broad market index fund, earning a historical average of 8%. You are not changing your lifestyle. You are not spending the money on cars or vacations. You are deploying it into an asset in both scenarios. To the average observer, both of these moves look like highly responsible financial decisions. But the final numbers at the end of 30 years tell a very different story. Let us run those numbers. If you effectively earn 4% on that $500 a month by avoiding mortgage interest, the future value of that decision over 30 years is roughly $350,000 to $400,000. That is a solid chunk of change, and it is exactly why people love paying off their homes. But look at scenario 2. If you invest that same $500 every month at an 8% return, it grows to roughly $680,000 to $750,000. The difference is staggering. You end up with over $300,000 more in wealth simply by routing the cash to a brokerage account instead of the mortgage lender. One investor on a Reddit finance forum summed it up perfectly. Over 30 years, an 8% return multiplies your money exponentially faster than a 4% return ever could. The protocol here is entirely about systematic redirection. If you understand the math, the next step is removing the temptation to make that extra mortgage payment. You have to treat your investment account with the exact same level of mandatory respect that you give your mortgage bill. Set up an automated transfer that pulls that $500 from your checking account and drops it into a diversified index fund on the exact same day your mortgage is paid. By linking the two actions chronologically, you satisfy the psychological urge to build wealth at the start of the month. You are building equity, but you are building it in a highly liquid, high-growth vehicle, instead of locking it away in the walls of your house, where it earns a mere 4% and cannot easily be accessed in an emergency. If you think losing $300,000 over 30 years is a bitter pill to swallow, wait until you see what happens when we scale the numbers up to match modern home prices. This is where conventional wisdom actively destroys generational wealth. We are about to look at a tale of two homeowners who buy the exact same house, have the exact same income, and hold the exact same aversion to debt. But one of them understands the time value of money, and the other blindly follows old-school financial advice. By the time they both reach retirement age, they will both own their homes completely free and clear. But one of them is going to have an extra $1 million sitting in cash, while the other is left totally dependent on a fixed income. Here is how that plays out. Let us introduce homeowner A and homeowner B. Both of them just signed the paperwork on a $400,000 30-year mortgage at a fixed rate of 4%. Their mandatory monthly principal and interest payment is roughly $1,900. Both of these individuals are disciplined savers, and they both have an extra $1,000 of cash flow every month to dedicate toward their financial future. Homeowner A is the aggressive prepayer. They hate the idea of being in debt to the bank, so they use that extra $1,000 to accelerate their mortgage payoff. Homeowner B is the investor. They pay only the mandatory $1,900 mortgage payment, and they quietly direct their extra $1,000 a month into a standard S&P 500 index fund. Fast forward 15 to 18 years, and the paths radically diverge. At roughly year 15 or 18, homeowner A achieves their dream. They make their final mortgage payment. They own the house outright. They have successfully saved hundreds of thousands of dollars in interest, which feels like a massive victory. But because they threw all their extra cash at the house, they invested very little during their peak compounding years. Now let us look at homeowner B at that exact same 15-year mark. Homeowner B still has a mortgage. They still owe the bank a monthly payment. But their investment account, fueled by that steady $1,000 a month growing at 8%, has ballooned. If they keep this up for the full 30 years, they will eventually have an investment portfolio worth roughly $1.2 to $1.4 million, generated entirely from that single stream of cash flow. Here is the protocol for viewing this scenario correctly. Homeowner B has a hidden superpower that homeowner A lacks entirely. It is called liquidity. At any point in time during those later years, homeowner B could simply log into their brokerage account, write a single check, and pay off the remaining balance of their mortgage in one afternoon. They have the exact same ability to become debt-free, but they retain total control over the timeline. Even after paying off the house with their portfolio, homeowner B would still have hundreds of thousands of dollars in extra net worth left over. The house is paid for, and they are rich. Homeowner A only has a paid-off house. That missing seven-figure difference is the wealth destroyed by prioritizing early prepayments over compounding investments when the rate gap is so wide. This is the point in the conversation where traditional savers start to feel deeply uncomfortable. Conventional wisdom says that all debt is inherently risky and should be eliminated as quickly as humanly possible. I am going to tell you the exact opposite. A long-term, low fixed-rate mortgage is actually one of the most powerful wealth protection tools ever invented. And if you rush to pay it off, you are actively volunteering to take on an economic risk that the bank is currently holding for you. We are going to look at why a 4% mortgage is actually classified as good debt, and how invisible macroeconomic forces are quietly eating away at your loan balance every single day without you having to lift a finger or make a single extra payment. It all comes down to inflation. From a pure mathematical standpoint, a fixed 4% mortgage has incredibly attractive properties for the borrower. The most powerful feature is that the nominal payment is frozen in time. If your mortgage payment is $1,900 today, it will still be exactly $1,900 in the year 2045. But the value of that $1,900 changes drastically. Thanks to standard economic inflation, your wages, the cost of goods, and the general money supply will all rise over the next 2 or 3 decades. As your income increases over your career to keep pace with inflation, that fixed mortgage payment represents a smaller and smaller percentage of your monthly take-home pay. Inflation is essentially doing the hard work of paying down the real value of your debt for you, making your loan cheaper to service every single year. Let us look at the real cost of capital. If inflation averages around 2.5 to 3% a year, the real interest rate on a 4% mortgage is practically negligible. Bankrate notes that inflation makes your payment cheaper in real terms over time. On top of that, your mortgage is non-callable. This means that even if interest rates skyrocket to 10% in the broader economy, the lender cannot suddenly demand that you pay a higher rate. They are locked into that 4% deal for 30 years. You hold all the cards. You retain the option value to pay it off early if you ever choose to, but the bank has absolutely no option to change the terms on you. Rushing to pay off a non-callable, inflation-subsidized loan is a massive, unforced error in personal finance. The operational protocol here is learning how to manage the spread between your cost of capital and your return on capital. A 4% mortgage keeps your cost of capital extremely low and completely predictable. The stock market gives you a chance at a much higher compounded growth rate. As long as you maintain that spread, you are generating wealth simply by holding the debt. Think of it this way. Dumping your extra money into a mortgage prematurely is exactly like logging into a brokerage account and choosing to buy a 4% bond when a much higher return asset is available and perfectly appropriate for your long-term time horizon. The protocol is simple. Make the minimum required payment. Let inflation erode the true cost of the debt, and aggressively deploy your surplus capital into assets that grow. Now, you might be thinking this is a blanket rule for everyone in every situation. It is not. There are specific scenarios where holding onto a mortgage is a terrible idea, and paying it off early is actually the smartest financial move you can make. We will get to the exact checklist you need to run through to see if you fall into that category in just a minute. But first, we need to address the most dangerous phase of your financial life. This is the period where the wealth destruction effect is most severe, and it is the exact same time when people feel the most pressure to aggressively pay down their homes. If you get this phase wrong, you cannot go back and fix it later. Time is the one asset you can never buy back. Saying that prepaying your mortgage destroys wealth is highly accurate when you are in your peak accumulation years. I am talking about your 20s, 30s, and 40s. This is the stage of life where compound interest is your strongest ally, because you have decades for it to work its magic. During these accumulation years, you are supposed to be buying income-producing assets. But I see people all the time who are entirely underinvested in the market. They are not maxing out their tax-advantaged retirement accounts. They are not capturing their full employer match. They are barely meeting their baseline retirement savings targets. Yet, they are funneling thousands of extra dollars a year into their 4% mortgage because they hate the idea of debt. In this scenario, the wealth destruction is very real and very measurable. Forbes and Ameriprise both heavily stress this point. If you can reasonably expect your investments to outpace your mortgage rate, and you are currently behind on your retirement goals, investing your extra cash must come first. In this specific scenario, every extra dollar you put into prepaying your mortgage avoids roughly 4 cents of interest per year. But it forfeits perhaps 8 to 10 cents of expected investment returns per year. When you compound that daily opportunity cost over 20 or 30 years, you have actively destroyed a substantial chunk of your potential retirement nest egg. You traded a vibrant, growing portfolio for a silent brick building. You might own the bricks, but bricks do not pay dividends, and they certainly do not generate the passive cash flow you need to replace your salary when you finally stop working. The protocol changes entirely if the mathematical environment shifts. The statement that prepaying destroys wealth is not true if your mortgage rate is high. If you bought a house recently and your mortgage rate is sitting at 7 or 8%, that is dangerously close to your realistic expected stock market return, especially after factoring in taxes on your investments. In that scenario, paying down your mortgage is like buying a guaranteed, risk-free bond that yields 8%. That is a fantastic conservative choice. Additionally, if you are already maxing out all your retirement accounts, you hold a massive emergency fund, and you are fully on track for retirement, then paying off the house early is just a cherry on top. It is not wealth destroying in that context. It is simply a conservative luxury choice for excess capital. We have looked at the hard math, the historic averages, and the compounding curves. But money is never just about spreadsheets and calculators. It is deeply psychological. If you present this 4% versus 8% argument to someone who hates debt, they will almost always tell you that you cannot put a price tag on peace of mind. They will say that sleeping well at night is worth more than any stock market return. But what if I told you that we actually can put a price tag on that exact feeling? And what if I told you that buying that specific type of peace of mind is going to cost you roughly $300,000? Let us look at the emotional payoff of debt freedom and why treating your feelings as a financial strategy is a very expensive luxury. Almost every professional financial source stresses that there is a massive psychological dimension to this debate. Forbes acknowledges that being entirely mortgage-free sounds like absolute music to your ears. Ameriprise points out that owning your home outright can be liberating, and it is hard to put a price on the deep security you might feel. When you do not owe the bank a monthly payment, your required living expenses plummet. If you lose your job, or if the economy goes into a severe recession, you do not have to worry about the bank foreclosing on your shelter. That level of baseline security is incredibly appealing, especially for people who grew up with financial instability. The urge to eliminate the mortgage is often driven by a primal need for safety, not by a desire to maximize total lifetime net worth. Before we calculate exactly how much that feeling of safety costs, I want to invite you to take your financial strategy to the next level. If you enjoy breaking down the math behind everyday money decisions, consider clicking the Join button below to become one of the optimizers. Channel members get priority comment replies from me, meaning your specific financial questions jump right to the top of the queue. You also get custom sketch badges next to your name to show you are part of the core community that values logic over conventional money myths. It is a great way to support the channel and keep these deep dive analyses coming every single week. Click Join if you want to be part of the inner circle. Now, let us look at what happens when emotions totally override the mathematics. Let us return to Bankrate. They clearly state that your personal feelings about debt and your unique risk tolerance are central to this decision. A financial planner quoted by Forbes said they generally advocate that investments will yield better returns, but they acknowledge the need for a nuanced perspective. A popular YouTube breakdown summarized it perfectly. If you rely entirely on the math, the numbers will tell you that holding on to a 3 or 4% mortgage is far more advantageous. But if you rely entirely on your emotions, your brain might be screaming at you to pay it off, just to relieve anxiety. The protocol here is acknowledging the actual cost. If you choose peace of mind, you are consciously deciding to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars in lost opportunity cost, just to feel slightly better on a Tuesday night. We have covered the psychological traps, the compounding math, and the inflation benefits of holding cheap debt. But theory is useless without execution. I have synthesized all the data from McKinsey, NerdWallet, and top-tier financial planners into a strict set of operational rules. These are the final guidelines you can use to immediately audit your own financial life and figure out if you are quietly leaking potential wealth. If you have been blindly throwing extra cash at your mortgage because it felt like the right thing to do, these next few minutes are going to give you a definitive framework to stop the bleeding. We are going to look at 5 core rules of thumb that will dictate exactly where your next dollar should go. Let us start with the most important rule regarding your eventual retirement timeline. Rule number 1 is the ultimate reality check. You cannot borrow money to fund your retirement. Ameriprise spells this out very clearly. You can take out a loan to buy a house, you can take out a loan to buy a car, and you can take out student loans to fund your education. But no bank on earth is going to issue you a loan to pay for your groceries and your health care when you are 75 years old and no longer generating an active income. If your retirement accounts are currently underfunded, every single dollar of extra cash belongs in your investment portfolio first. Prioritizing a low-rate mortgage payoff over building a retirement nest egg is essentially guaranteeing that you will have a fully paid-off house but zero cash flow to actually sustain your life inside it. Rule number 2 relates directly to the spread. If your mortgage rate is low, meaning anywhere in the 3 to 4% range, and you are not currently maxing out your investment options, prepaying the house is almost always a mathematical mistake. The expected broad market returns of 7 to 10% completely dwarf that guaranteed 4% return you get from paying down the debt. As we established earlier, over a 30-year period, this compounding gap expands into the hundreds of thousands. Rule number 3 naturally follows. You must treat early mortgage payoff as a luxury goal, not a first priority. You pay off your high-interest credit cards first. You build a fully funded emergency cash reserve. You maximize your tax-advantaged investing accounts. Only then do you consider accelerating your mortgage payments if you really want to. Rule number 4 is remembering that inflation is your quiet ally when it comes to long-term fixed-rate debt. Those fixed 4% payments will steadily get cheaper in real purchasing power terms as your income rises and consumer prices climb. The relative burden of that debt shrinks over time without any extra effort on your part. Finally, rule number 5 is arguably the most important. You must know yourself. If having debt stresses you out so severely that it derails your daily life, ruins your sleep, or keeps you paralyzed from investing in the market at all, then paying down the mortgage may actually be worth the heavy mathematical cost. Bankrate notes that personal risk tolerance matters, but you have to be honest with yourself about the massive financial price tag attached to that emotional comfort. At the end of the day, personal finance is deeply personal, but the math remains completely objective. You are standing at a fork in the road with your extra cash. Down one path, you hand your money back to the bank to save 4%, locking your liquidity inside a brick wall. Down the other path, you buy pieces of the greatest wealth-generating machine in human history, allowing your capital to compound at historically higher rates while inflation slowly eats away your mortgage balance for you. The choice seems entirely counterintuitive to everything we were taught growing up. We were told to fear debt, but the real danger is not the low-interest mortgage. The real danger is arriving at retirement age and realizing you traded millions of dollars in potential growth for a premature sense of comfort. I want to hear how this plays out in your own life. This channel thrives on peer review and real-world data gathering. Head down to the comments right now and let me know your exact mortgage rate and what strategy you are currently using. Are you aggressively prepaying, or are you redirecting that cash into the market to capture the spread? Have you found a middle ground that helps you sleep at night while still building liquid wealth? Drop your thoughts below so we can analyze the different approaches the community is taking. If you have not already, hit the like button to help the algorithm share this financial breakdown, and make sure you subscribe so you do not miss the next deep dive into the math behind your money. I will see you in the next one.